The MLB draft starts on Sunday. Who better to talk about it with than Johnny Venezia? You catch him on Breaking Bet, catch him on RotoWire, follow him on Twitter at _JohnnyVTV. All come up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Jeff Erickson here. I'm here with Johnny Venezia, and he does some work for us at RotoWire. He does a lot of his own work. He does Breaking Bet as well. Johnny, the draft is coming up. We're watching Paul Skenes. He's working on something special right now against the Brewers. This is why we watch college baseball, why we care about this, seeing these guys join the program here.
Great to be joining with you, Jeff. Yeah, absolutely. You know, Dylan Cruz said, if you want to be a great player and get to the MLB, then you got to go to college. What I say is if you want to be a great MLB handicapper or fantasy expert, you got to watch the college game. And, you know, we've just seen so much talent in the last few years come from the college side. And we got guys going right now. Paul Skenes doing something pretty incredible at the moment. And, you know, he's just one of the few guys that are really at this college level that are unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, last year was an incredible class, no doubt about it there. I think that's one of the things is like you see that special class come in, you get so pumped. I'm in a score sheet league where we draft guys at our supplemental draft in June. Can't wait to get a taste of that. The RotoWire Staff Keeper League. I've got another one called the XFL where we can draft college players when they're still in college. Hell, I could draft them in high school and junior high if I wanted to, or players in Japan. It's good to know these guys, get them before they become expensive.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's the thing. It's like buying Microsoft in the 80s. You want to know these guys that are going to be great before everybody else knows about them. And, you know, even somebody like we're talking about, even somebody like him, you know, nobody really in the mainstream knew about him until the second half of April last year. So, you know, this is a guy that was generally unknown to anybody not following college baseball, you know, in 2022 or even the beginning of 23 before his LSU days really took hold. And, you know, he was flying under the radar just a little bit to the mainstream community because, you know, college baseball is not that well known. But then, you know, once it's got out, then people start locking in. But, you know, this is just something that it's a must if you want to be, you know, at the top of the space in fantasy or betting when it comes to baseball.
Yeah, literally flying with the Air Force there too. So, you know, that's part of it there. This year's class isn't as highly touted as last year's. Last year's was ridiculous. Where does it rate for you, generally speaking? I know I don't want to compare it to last year, but just generally, is this a strong class, lower, lesser class, medium? What do you think? Where do you think it rates?
I think it's a matter of opinion, what people think, whether it's strong or it's weak. I happen to think it's a pretty good draft class. I think it's balanced. There's a lot of college talent in terms of pitching and hitting. I do think the pitching is a little top heavy, but, you know, the thing is coming into the year, there was a lot of pitchers that projected to be first rounders that had down years that are going to slide out of the first and probably out of the second round. But hitting wise, I think it is pretty balanced. I just feel like because there's no Skenes or no Wyatt Langford this year, people have, or even Dylan Cruz, people have kind of already written it off as being a weaker class. And I personally don't think that's the case. I do think it is more opinionated, but I'm of the belief that this is a relatively good draft class.
All right, cool. And I hope that's true because I got a lot of early picks coming up here. I've actually got two players in that one league I talked about. It's the XFL. It's 15-team league. We have 40-man rosters, but you only keep 15 players every year, and that includes prospects. So you really have to make some tough calls. But I have Charlie Condon. I have Hagen Smith. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do, whether they can pull that one off. Let's talk real quick there about what you do, how your process. Like, I know you cover a lot of college baseball. You bet college baseball. You bet player props. Tell the people more what you do.
Yeah, so, you know, college baseball for me is a full-time thing. Every weekend I'm glued to the TV for 3 or 4 days straight. And, you know, I always watch what the numbers are. Typically, Draftkings is the king of getting the numbers out first. Every book follows after Draftkings. And there are occasions where some books will try to give out their own number. But as soon as DK puts it out, the other books adjust very close to what DraftKings has. And, for me, it's really about understanding its identity. Who do they have pitching? What's the weekend rotation look like? What does their offense look like? And the thing is with college, a lot of it revolves around the eye test and studying, because the information and statistics aren't as available to you as, say, the MLB, where you could log on to ESPN or you could log on to any site and get an in-depth breakdown of what a team players' numbers are, splits. So it requires a lot of homework in order to be able to form a clear, concise opinion that gives you a good idea of how to bet it. Now, Jeff, in all fairness, betting college baseball is so difficult because, in general, as you know, baseball is the highest variance sport we have. Then you throw in college guys who are amateurs, who bats. It's very difficult. But, for me, I have to do a lot of homework, and that requires watching a lot of games and getting a feel, and just, you get the eye test, seeing if a guy is legit or he's struggling or where the shortcomings may be coming from.
Yeah. And then you have the information gap. I mean, they're not required to tell you everything. Like, we have pretty good reporting in professional sports, but I know playing college fantasy football that, you run into he's not running with the starters this week, or that, something like that, or a suspension that's announced after the game. Well, I'm sure in baseball, it's just the same, trying to get good information like that. It's got to be tricky. I know there's that college coach that got in big trouble for trying to leverage some of that information one time, calling from the stadium in Cincy, to
Brad
try
Bohannon's mouth.
Yep. It's still the reporting aspect of it's got to be much harder for you too.
That's one of the biggest things, and that's something that I've been calling for, and I called for it aggressively this year. The biggest thing is teams not announcing pitching. Typically, it's not a problem this season, where a lot of teams, unless somebody's hurt, you have an idea of what a team's rotation is going to be. And especially in the ACC, like you've seen who a team's been throwing out there week after week. Really it's when it comes down to the season when guys are on short rest. Is this guy going to go? And then you have to play a guessing game. That's where it's a problem, where sometimes you don't the starting pitchers till 10 minutes before opening pitch. That's something I've been calling for to be adjusted. Like, give us at least a 6-hour window to let us know when a guy is going. But in order to kind of combat that handicap, you have to narrow it down, deductive reasoning. Who's the guys that are likely to go, and then kind of handicap it that way. But you're right. The information is a lot far fewer in between. So that's really where some of the difficulties come, but usually it's not that much of a problem because you have a pretty good idea who's going to go. And most of it revolves around the pitching, especially in the sport of college baseball.
Yeah. You're down in Florida. You're in the heart of it. You get a lot of SEC and ACC coverage. When you try to get to like the postseason, then you all of a sudden have players from other conferences trying to figure that out, especially like, the coverage for, formerly the Pac-12, but like the West Coast teams, the Big West, all those teams like Santa Barbara or something like that, trying to get good coverage on them, trying to handicap them has got to even be more difficult too.
Yeah, the Pac-12's tough. First of all, it's not as watchable. Like you could get the Pac-12 network, but for me, how many subscriptions am I going to get? I have the ESPN Plus. I have the Flow Sports, which is only really good for the first month of the season. And Pac-12 I watch here and there, but the thing is that the talent generally is not as good in the Pac-12. So it is harder to handicap because you get certain guys that are pretty much ahead of the pack. But it seems like, especially in the Pac-12, there's always chaos after dark. The pitching isn't as good. You don't have like that legitimate ace or closer in the Pac-12 that you do in, say, the SEC or the ACC.
Yeah, conference realignments changed things up. So has the transfer window issues and all that. NIL has changed things. I remember the Pac-12 being a strong conference. Hell, I went to high school in Wichita. I remember Wichita State being awesome every single year in the Valley and all that. And they're not even in the Valley anymore, and they're not nearly as strong as they used to be. But yeah, it's really kind of gravitated to the southeast portion of the country there. A lot, you see like, and when Stanford develops a player, well, ends up going to Texas A&M. They lose all their players anyhow. So it's tricky for those programs too.
Yeah, I mean, the transfer portal, the NIL, all that stuff changed the game. And, some of it's fun. But I understand why coaches, especially the old-fashioned ones, Gilmore, a perfect example, who was a Hall of Fame coach for Coastal Carolina, just retired after this past season. He was very, very vocal about hating NIL and the transfer portal, how it's kind of ruined the game. But in all fairness, I like to see players kind of know their worth and have options because they've been exploited by universities for 100 years. But, it's definitely changed the game. So some of it is good and otherwise there are bad parts to it. But, I think ultimately players are getting what they should be getting. And it's definitely kind of thrown a wrinkle into the betting portion of it as well because – sometimes there's late transfers that can make a difference to coming to a team. Indeed.
One more macro question before we start getting into the players themselves. If you're doing like a dynasty league or you're doing like a supplemental draft like I'm doing, do you prefer to focus on the guys that can contribute right away? Or are you looking more for like higher ceiling long-term? And this is basically a high school versus college question, right? I mean, for the most part there, or maybe hitters versus pitchers. So hitters are going to come quicker than pitchers more often than not. Paul Skenes being the big fat exception to that one there. But for the most part, what's your preference when you're looking for those? Like, do you prefer the immediate guys?
I think it's a case by case. It's a mix of both. It's really who I think is going to be good for, a long period of time. There are guys who I think high school wise, it's a lot harder because high school takes a really long time. And a lot of people don't want to wait 5 years from high school to come up and then find his way. So typically I do gravitate more towards college. And even then there's some where it's like, all right, they're going to need some work in order to really kind of scratch that potential that they have. I do like guys that have the higher ceilings, but ultimately I would prefer to take somebody that I know is going to be up in the league in 2 years rather than have to wait 4 or 5. But it is a case by case, and it's definitely something where you have to weigh timelines as opposed to ceilings and so forth.
Indeed. By the way, Skenes is out of the game. It's Holderman in there now. Holderman has given up 2 hits. So no hitter, but Skenes was awesome again today. Just want to throw that out there for those who are tracking on that one. Man, let him pitch the 8th, but I get it too. You got to protect. Jones is already on IL. Falter's already on IL. They don't want to overdo it.
You know why they did that? You know why they did that? Because if they threw him out there for the 8th with only 97 pitches and he goes, say, 12 pitches and keeps the no-hitter intact to the 8th, then all of a sudden he's approaching 110 pitches. Then he might need 20 pitches to get out of 9th to get a no-hitter. And then they have him throwing 130 pitches as opposed to 97. So that's why they did it. If he came out 8 no-hit innings, then they're basically obligated to let him go.
Yeah, they're pot committed at that point. I totally agree with you on that one there. Absolutely. And then we have Augie Garrido all over again. They're trying to run people into the ground, but you want to go old school Texas manager there. All right, we're going to talk about this draft class specifically, but first, quick note from our sponsors. First, our friends at DraftKings have the PickSix app. Did you ever play the over-under game with your friends? Think I can eat that slice of pizza in under 30 seconds, or know that I'll take you over a minute to down that 2-liter? If you have, you're going to love PickSix, the new fantasy game from DraftKings. Here's how to play during baseball season. Pick between 2 and 6 players and choose if they have more or less of a stat, like runs, hits, strikeouts, and more. Track your picks and play against others for a shot to win huge cash prizes. That's all there is to it. Download the DraftKings PickSix app and use code RWPicks. New customers play $5 and get 50 in PickSix credits. That's code RWPicks for new customers to play $5 and get 50 in PickSix credits only on DraftKings PickSix. The crown is yours. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawal PickSix credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 18 plus in most eligible states. Not available in all states, including New York and Connecticut. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos. Also, we're on the Blue Wire Network. Here are their ads. Thank you to the Blue Wire Network, as always, for providing a host for us to host our podcast. I'm here with Johnny Venezia. We're talking about the MLB draft and some in college baseball players coming into the draft this year. And like for the most part, Johnny, this year, the top projected picks are almost all college players.
Yeah, I mean, the high school talent is pretty solid, but at the end of the day, you really got to be in a weak college class, or the high school players got to be like Mike Trout in order for a high school to go one. We know Jackson Holiday went 2 years ago. Hitting wise, it wasn't the strongest draft, and a lot of it has to do with something you don't realize in the MLB more than any other draft. There's something called slot value. So each pick is assigned a certain slot in terms of dollars. Now, ideally, the team wants to take the cheapest player so they have enough money to fill out their entire draft and pay everybody. So what can happen is ultimately the best player might not go number 1 or number 2 because they might cost too much. Whereas you can get a good player and save, say, $1.5–2 million on him because he's willing to take less money, and therefore you're willing to do that. Now you have to weigh the balance of financial versus, if you're going to take the best player. For instance.
Indeed. And you hear about the signability picks sometimes before, and some teams do a better job of leveraging that. I was reading Keith Law, and he thinks it's a bad year to do that, to try to, maybe get a cheaper first round pick so you can kind of buy players later in the draft. So, because, have your certain amount of draft budget. He's saying this is kind of a bad year for that. Maybe the depth of the classes and what it should be, but, that's up for debate, obviously. And like you said before, it depends on what you see and some of the players you like.
I think there's a lot of really talented prospects, especially in the first couple rounds. To that point, I wouldn't be skimping. There are guys that are titans in this draft. There are guys that could be MVPs and Cy Young winners. So I would be looking to spend in the first few rounds of this draft, because while you're always able to find talent somewhere down the line in any draft, you have guys that could be impact players early. So I would be looking to break open the bank, and I'm going to name them right now just because we're going to really get into it momentarily here. But in this first round, with all the talent you have, I would definitely be looking to sign some of these guys, even if it means paying slot value for them.
I agree. I think that's the way to go too. I think that the teams that skimp like early, especially if they have one of those top 5, top 10 picks, and they try to do that. Well, usually it used to be the Pirates. They're finally cured themselves with that. It rarely works out. It usually doesn't. So let's just jump into the players themselves. If you're the Cleveland Guardians, who are you taking at number 1 overall?
Definitely not Travis Bazzana. I've been talking about this for the entire year. Now, this is not – I'm going to be a little bit long-winded on this one. I'm just going to forewarn you. I think Travis Bazzana is very good. I think he's going to have a very good future in the MLB. I think he's all-star caliber. I don't think he's MVP caliber. He's 25-25, 310 average, solid second baseman. Defensively, he's not great, but he's not bad. I think he's okay. He's good enough. And the fact is, Bazzana is not only not the best player in this draft, he doesn't have the highest ceiling. He's got a high floor. He's got a high ceiling, but not the highest. And you can make a case realistically for anybody that's watched college baseball extensively. He might not even be the 7th most talented player in terms of pure upside in this draft. And you just have an opportunity to take a guy like Charlie Condon or Jack Caglianone, 2 guys that play great defense, versatile, guys that 40 to 50 home runs in any given season. Cags, if any team allows him an opportunity to pitch at the MLB level and he could succeed, that's an added bonus. And then you look at a guy like Chase Burns, who I was on record last summer saying I think Chase Burns has a higher MLB ceiling than Paul Skenes. I think Chase Burns is a guy, when you consider Cleveland, a team who has homegrown prospects for the last couple decades, I think the Guardians, who have been lacking a true ace for the last half decade, are looking at a guy like Chase Burns and could grab him. And, I think Burns is going to be up in the big leagues next year. Same way as Skenes. Chase Burns, in my opinion, has the second best slider in all of baseball, regardless of level. Only behind Dylan. This is a guy that gets up to 102. His body frame is not even filled out. Burns was a well-known prospect coming in. Nobody knew who Skenes was before 2023, really. So I think when you're looking at all these options at the number one pick, and I'm not forgetting about J.J. Wetherholt, a guy coming into the year was really regarded as the number one overall prospect. But because he got hurt and he missed half the time, where, by the way, he's still batted over 330, he's a guy who's got second base, shortstop, third base eligibility. He batted 450 last year in the country. And because he got hurt in the draft year, due to recency bias, people fell out of favor with him just a little bit. I don't think Bazzana should be going 1. Personally, I think Jack Caglianone should go 1. For a generation that's obsessed, Jeff, with Shohei Ohtani, you're getting a guy that hit 35 home runs this year, 33 last year. He struck out 25 times this season while batting 420. He hits shots over 500 feet. He plays gold glove defense at first base, and he's got the potential to be a number 2 or number 3 pitcher for a major league roster if some of his details get ironed out. And he's
let him
overall well-rounded hitter. I would give him a shot. Why wouldn't you? He's a guy that can get up to 100 miles an hour as a lefty with a good slider. There are issues with him as a pitcher right now that I think have to get worked out if he's going to have a legitimate shot to succeed. But it's worth investing in just to see. Because guess what? Even if he doesn't pitch or he can't hack it, a team just doesn't want to take away from his offensive prowess. This guy that is good enough to go 1-1 off offensive game alone. This is a guy we could be seeing hit 45 home runs and batting 320 in the major leagues while winning a gold glove at first base.
My concern pitching-wise was he was losing velocity, especially in the postseason there. And some of that has to do with short rest, obviously. Florida had to play a lot of games. But
yeah. I think the velo thing was a little bit of a concern, but it was only 1 or 2 starts towards the end. I'm not going to take too much of that into consideration unless there is an injury. This is a Tommy John in 2021, and when he was a freshman, he only platooned in the field a little bit. He didn't have bats, and he didn't pitch in 2022 in his freshman year because he was coming off TJ. But I think it's worth investing, and even if you scrap the pitch, which I don't think is going to be a right away decision, you're getting a guy that very well I think is the best player in the country and might have the most offensive upside.
I like the leadership that he had too. I really thought, you could just tell personality wise, from afar, obviously I'm not sitting in the dugout, but from all reports, everything, the way he carried himself, I was impressed with that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He has a lot of intangibles. Guys look up to him. And you know what the crazy thing is? This guy, on paper had a chase rate that's a little bit higher, but, I think some of these things are a little arbitrary when you're trying to scout a college player with certain tools. It's different competition. You're using a metal bat, you know what I mean? And these guys aren't even at the level that they're going to be at in a few years. But, to have 25 strikeouts, while hitting 35 home runs and batting basically 420, like he was hitting leadoff, and teams have to pitch to him. They have to pitch to him, and he's still able to just demolish it. He had almost 70 home runs in his his last 2 years at college level. It just, we don't see guys that have the kind of pure raw power that he has, but then can also have a high tool. You don't see it.
Yeah, I agree. I put it this way. I'm a Reds fan. I want to see either Condon or Caglianone go 1-2. That's who I want to see. I don't care if they have other guys that can play first. I want the best bat, and those are the 2 best bats in my opinion.
You know what's crazy? I don't want Condon, Cags, or Chase Burns to be a Cleveland Guardian because I personally, it's not for me. I just don't want to see it. Like, because I have some MLB draft bets, like my wallet will want to see it, but if you're talking about like what I would love to see just from like baseball perspective, I would love to see Jack Caglianone playing with the Cincinnati Reds. First base, replace that Joey Votto bat. He's a guy in the Great American Ballpark, is 40 plus home runs. in a lineup with a lot of young talent, and maybe you get some innings out of a mound. That's where I would love to see Cags personally.
Yeah, that would be a beautiful thing. I would love to see it. Let's talk a little Condon here too. Golden Spikes winner. Man, what a year he had. Just, granted, that ballpark, it's the ball carries in Georgia, no doubt about that there. But
yeah,
still, I mean, it's not like we're using the bats that we used 10 years ago. The bats now they're not like the happy fun ball bats. They're actually, they're not wood, but they're also not the same, like, triple wall like we used to have like 10 years ago. But I'm impressed with what he did. What does he look like defensively? Is he third base? Is he outfield? Where does he project eventually?
Condon, he's 6'6", so I don't see him being a third baseman, in the big leagues full time. I mean, listen, in a pinch, maybe you want to get him some reps. Somebody needs a breather. He could play third base, but quite frankly, more as a corner outfielder or a first baseman, which is weird because I think he spent a lot more time at first base last year. He was playing center field a lot this year as well. So I think corner outfield or first base is where I would project him at. But, this kid really doesn't have many weak spots at all. He's one of the most sound players in the entire draft and one of the last few. And, it's funny, early in the season when he started off on the heater, there's being a lot of side-by-side comparisons to like Wyatt Langford's offensive game. Obviously, body types are a little bit different, but the way he swings the bat, the way he coaches, and the pure power is very interesting to see. But I think Charlie Condon is going to be, he's going to be a great player, and he's just really starting to come into his own. He's not a guy that was really regarded. I'm sure everybody's read the article at this point where he was overlooked, and it was almost a miracle that Georgia even got him for the 2022 season.
Yeah.
For a redshirt freshman. But Charlie Condon's a guy I watched extensively over the last couple of years. I actually won a 15-1 Golden Spikes ticket on him for the season. So I was rooting hard for Charlie Condon. He had 37 home runs. He batted over 430. This is a guy, he's got every bit of a case to be the number one pick as well. But again, I don't think you wrong whether you go Cags or Condon number one or Chase Burns. I think Charlie Condon's a guy that is going to have a case to maybe win some battles. I do think, there is some tendency at the next level to be a little bit swing and miss. But I have nothing things to say about Condon. I'm really looking forward to him being a pro.
Nice. We're going to talk a few more players here, but first, quick note from our friends at Home Run Forecast. Can certain weather conditions lead to more home runs? The atmosphere can affect how far a baseball flies by 20%. Home Run Forecast measures the weather conditions at a ballpark to tell us if the atmosphere is good or bad for ball flight during a game. An index value that rates the air is created for each game and ballpark and is displayed on a scale from 1 to 10. Home Run Forecast premium site offers index values by the hour for each game. 24-hour forecast, wind direction and speed, and whether the roof will be open at certain stadiums. Home Run Forecast is offering a special for the start of the baseball season and for the rest of the baseball season. You can get access to the premium site for only $28, a savings of nearly 30%. Go to homerunforecast.com/RotoWire now to sign up. Here with Johnny Venezia, I want to go back to the pitchers. One other comment on Chase Burns before we talk a little Hagen Smith. Burns, it's amazing. Sophomore year, he gets bounced from the Tennessee rotation. He has to transfer to Wake, and then he becomes like him or Smith now become the first pitcher in the draft. It speaks to your point that these guys can pop up pretty quickly.
Yeah, Chase Burns was he was a very highly regarded recruit coming into Tennessee, and see his freshman year, he was awesome, and you just saw the potential that this guy had, and then he struggled as a sophomore in Tennessee, and Tony V removed him from the rotation, put him more as like a hybrid closer, and he succeeded. He looked great. The stuff made a huge jump. I think there were some irrevocable differences, I should say, with Tennessee's brass and Tony V. And, from my sources, originally he wanted to transfer to Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt didn't want him. And the only place that would really take him was Forest. And I think that was the best place for him, honestly. Wake Forest is known for the pitching lab. You've seen over the last few years how Wake has been able to just turn up the volume on guys like Rhett Lauder, Josh Hartle, even though he had a down year this year, Seth Keener, Sean Sullivan, Burns. So, it was really the best place. And Wake was a team that was able to get the most of him. And you saw the velo jump consistently, where he was frequently at 99 to 101 and occasionally touch 102. The slider is demonic. That's the only way to describe it. If you haven't seen Chase Burns' slider, I would recommend going to watch some of his highlights. I'm not kidding. It is the most aggressive 12-6 slider that you'll see outside of maybe Dylan Seeks, but he's playing it off of a 101-mile-an-hour fastball. So you have 101 coming at you, and then you have a 90-mile-an-hour slider starting on the same plane and then just falling on the table. But he's also got the curve and the change, electric strikeouts, but he really dialed back on the walks. And the bugaboo, Jeff, like most power pitchers, is the home runs. It's a bravado thing. I think I'm going to sneak 100 by this guy. And, guys are just too good, even at this level. But I think feeling-wise, Chase Burns might be better than Paul Skenes. He's got more pitches that's a little bit more developed. I think his fastball slider combination is better. And the thing is, like, you look at Skenes, for instance, his frame's filled. He's 6'6", 240. He's not going to get much bigger. Burns is maybe 6'3", 215. This is going to fill out. And the one thing with Burns is right now, he's more of a max effort guy. Like every pitch is max effort. But as he gets stronger and as he develops more, he's going to be able to sit 100, 101. And it's not going to be as much of a max effort. And this guy's just only get better. He's an electric factory on the mound. And while I think Hagen Smith was the best college pitcher this year, I think Burns is the highest ceiling. So I think he is capable of going 1-1, but, selfishly, I want to see him go to Colorado, even though it's a tough place to pitch, only because he would rejoin forces with my boy Chase Dollander, Dolly. It'd be the Chase brothers from Tennessee together again in the same rotation. That would be a disgusting 1-2 punch over the next decade.
Knowing the pace-eating Rockies, though, they'll be in the same rotation in Double-A for like 3 years from now or something like that because of the way they're slow-rolling Dollander. But
it's sickening to me. That's my boy. Dolly is my boy. Like Wyatt Langford's my guy for sure, but like Dolly was the original guy for me. And honestly, he was the guy that was supposed to be Paul. He was supposed to be the number 1 pick coming into 23. He had a little bit of a down year, and because of that, they kind of lost favor. But Dolly, the projected best pitcher in the draft coming into the 2023 season. And, Paul Skenes kind of stole the thunder, but Dolly could be every bit as good as Paul Skenes. And, he's another guy that's frame's not filled out. He's got a little bit of improvements and tweaks to make, but it's there, man. It's there.
Yeah. Well, it's a shame he's in Colorado. That's all I'm going to say. I just hate that whole organization. Let's move on. Hagen Smith. I've seen the Chris Sale comps. I've seen both in terms of his delivery, obviously the frame, lefty, throws hard, had a great year. I know sometimes there's some concern about his command, especially deep into games. What's your take on Hagen Smith?
Love Hagen Smith. He was an ATM this year. Backed him every single week. I backed him. This is a guy that, despite the lack of run support, where every Thursday or Friday night when I would bet him, I knew the likelihood is he might only get 1, 2, or 3 runs, and I'm still firing because he's that good. Hagen Smith is, he's the best pitcher in college this year, like throughout the whole season. And, it's a lefty that's 100, 101 with an unreal slider. I do think in order to keep succeeding at this level, he's got to really develop that third pitch. He tries to get the changeup in there a little bit, but primarily he's a 2-pitch guy. I think Hagen Smith is a guy that's going to succeed in the pro level if he continues to develop. But, I feel like he's more of like I would say a later mid first round or 10 pick. I don't think he's Chris Sale, though. I think Chris Sale's Jamie Arnold. Jamie Arnold's going to be the number one pitcher off the board next summer.
Okay.
That's true Chris Sale. But I'm a big fan of Hagen Smith. Followed him the last couple of years, and he made an unreal jump too because he just had a lot of stuff in 2023. But in 24, he put it all together, and he showed that he's a Cy Young kind of guy, at least at the college level.
Months behind asked about Nick Kurtz. I wanted to ask about him and JJ Wetherholt, two guys that got hurt. Possibly could have been 1.1s, but probably won't be now.
Yeah, Nick Kurtz he's the real deal, man. He really is. I had a chance to see Wake Forest in the 2023 season. I went to Wake for the Super Regionals at Alabama, and he's a behemoth. I mean, he checks a lot of boxes. Another guy that you can make a case, he's the best first baseman defensively in the class. Tons of power, 6'5" frame. Again, that's not filled out yet. So he's only get bigger and stronger. I would say the one concern is the swing and miss, but he does walk a lot. He gets on base a ton. So, there's nothing but upside for Nick Kurtz. Originally coming into the season, but Cincinnati was going to be a great place for him. And I think ultimately Kurtz is a guy that has maybe somewhat due to the injury fallen a little bit out of favor. And for the people that are looking at betting it, his number was 11.5 draft position, which is ridiculous. I got it at, I think, minus 120 and it's ballooned to minus 170. If a team lets him out of the top 10, that's egregious. I see Nick Kurtz probably going somewhere in the top 8 just because of he's a guy that's 35 to 40 home run potential in the big leagues while batting clean over 300 and winning a Gold Glove. So Nick Kurtz is a guy that I have a lot of hopes on. There's not many players in this draft that's got a higher potential than Nicky Nukes.
All right. JJ Wetherholt, West Virginia second baseman, another guy that could have been 1.1. He's had 2 major hamstring injuries. That might, ding him a little bit. What are your thoughts on him?
I think Wetherholt he's unbelievable. I mean, he's one of the best. He might be the best pure hitter in the draft when you consider just hit tool. Solid in the field, but now the fact is he moved over from second to third, from second base last year to shortstop this year. So he's got the shortstop eligibility, which we know for ball clubs is huge. And he's got power, great speed. I think if you look at what he did in 2023, batting .449, 36 steals, 19 home runs, you're seeing a guy that's close to being a 5-tool player. And I think JJ Wetherholt is a guy that does have a case to be the number 1 overall pick. Defensive versatility with a really good offensive prowess. JJ Wetherholt's a guy that I've been paying attention to for the last few years, and I really love what I see from him. I think this is a guy that is definitely one of the 5 or 6 best players in the country. And unfortunately, because of the injury, like you said, that might ding him a little bit, Jeff. And it's unfortunate, but, at the end of the day, this is a tough draft because you have 5 or 6 or 7 guys in the top 10 from the college side that it's hard to make up your mind. But at the end of the day, I don't think any of these guys you take, you can really miss.
Yeah. I got one more college player to ask, and then we'll kind of dig a little deeper after that. Braden Montgomery, Texas A&M, transferred from Stanford. It worked out pretty well for him, suffice to say. What's your take on him?
B-Mont, I think the broken ankle that he suffered against Oregon in the Super Regionals is going to impact his draft stock a touch, not too dramatic. Switch hitter, tons of power, has an absolute cannon in right field. A guy that they tried out pitching a couple innings. He's not a guy that's going to pitch in the pros, most likely. But offensively, this is a guy that is definitely top 10, top 7. Is going to be a big asset for any ball club because, the fact is he was a star at Stanford. When he transferred to Texas A&M, he hit a whole new gear.
Yeah.
He a level that brought him into the conversation to even be a top 5, top 3 player pre-injury. Now, granted, a lot of his offensive numbers, you have to credit with the lineup he was in. Look who was hitting in front of him. You have Gavin Graham, who's going to be a top 10 pick in 2026, and you have my boy Jace Lavalette, the college Matt Olson, who I have mocked as the number 1 pick in 2025. That's who's hitting ahead of him this year. So some of it has to do with that, but this guy he's a star. He is an absolute superstar, and another one that I'm expecting to have a very good MLB career.
Let's move outside of the top 10, top 15, guys that are obvious. Like, who are some of your favorite draft sleepers from this class? Some guys that may have to do a little digging on. We're not talking like 20th round or 15th round or anything like that, but just someone that maybe not so obvious as some of your favorite top prospects.
Well, it's hard because I think he is a top prospect. He's not being viewed at. I think Vance Honeycutt is arguably the most talented player in this draft. Vance Honeycutt is 5 tools as 5 tools come. If there's one player, you ask me, if there's only one guy you could say is 5 tools in this draft, it's Vance Honeycutt. The best fielder, period, in the country, in the class. He is Mike Trout in center field. He's a vacuum. He robs more home runs than Trout did. He's next generation Trey Turner with a splash of Julio Rodriguez. He is a 40-40 caliber guy at the next level. But what's the one bugaboo that's going to keep him going 1-1 or possibly even top 10? It's the swing and miss. It's the strikeouts. I don't really understand what the problem is, why his approach is a little bit more feast or famine. But again, this is a guy that batted over 300 this year. I think if an MLB team is able to cut his strikeouts or swing and miss in half, it's a guy that we might look back at in 10 years and say, this is the best player of this draft class. This is a guy that I think can win an MVP. This is a guy that I think is going to be a fantasy asset. You're gonna have to deal with the strikeouts, like almost every young player coming into the league in the first 2 or 3 years has a bad strikeout problem. It just happens. But Vance Honeycutt's going to be a guy where he's going to be a league winner. I think the fact people in that are making mock drafts are disregarding him, and right now his draft position is set at 18.5, which is criminal. How could a team pass up on a guy with this much upside? I genuinely don't understand it.
LSU and West Virginia would agree with you on that one there, given what he did to them. He came up in the clutch a lot too. That's one thing I did like seeing quite a bit. I love seeing what he did. All right. On the other, we got to go a little negative here. Who's someone that's getting a lot of buzz, getting a lot of hype that you're taking, like you'd bet the over on his draft position, someone you maybe steer away from?
I mean, to be honest, I think, when you look at somebody like Waldschmidt, I'm not saying he's a bust by any stretch of the imagination, but Waldschmidt's picked the outfielder from Kentucky. He's picked up so much steam in the last few weeks because of Kentucky's success and their run to the College World Series. And, he had a great year. He was a 2020 plus guy. He had a high average, but that doesn't always translate in the big leagues. So I think, Ryan Waldschmidt, that I think can be solid, but, he's picked up so much first round talk where, even a month ago, even probably early May, nobody was even looking at, or 2 months ago, nobody was looking at Ryan Waldschmidt as being a legitimate first rounder. What was one of the most bizarre things about Kentucky was they don't have a definitive first rounder on that team that they had this year. Now, Waldschmidt's being talked about as, I think even if he goes that high, I just don't see him living up to, a first round billing. I think he could be solid.
Okay.
And then another one is Carson Benge from OK State. Same kind of boat as Waldschmidt, where I think he could be solid, but Benge is regarded even in the winter as a guy that's top 15, top 20. I personally don't see it. I think he's a solid bat with some power. He's slotted in as the Sunday guy in the rotation, but I don't think he's going to be a two-way guy in the big leagues. And I think he's a solid outfielder. So I'm not expecting as much production on Benge as to say he's going to be a first-round pick, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And sometimes I kind of wonder, like, okay, because they are potentially two-way players, does that slow their development? Does that slow their ascension to the majors and all that? And if so, usually in that case, I'm usually kind of a little extra wary of them. I mean, yeah, we have Ohtani and he's been amazing, but there's been a few other two-way players that haven't really kind of fit the bill, and they've kind of shortened both categories. I'm trying to think who's the Rays guy I'm thinking of that everybody was all over. This is great podcasting when I'm forgetting a name like this, but the couple of these two-way players that became zero-way players eventually. That was the problem.
It's a tough thing to do. Two-way players is a very difficult thing to do. That's why Ohtani makes it look easy. Everybody, a lot of people growing up are two-way players, but it was never really a thing as you get higher that, let's focus on two different things. Let's just be great at one thing. Yeah,
exactly. I'm trying, it's bugging me that I can't remember. Brendan McKay. That's it. That's the guy I was trying to think of there. Hasn't made his major league debut in 2019. He's out of baseball now, I think. But he's a guy that just never developed. And of course, you run the risk getting an arm injury as a pitcher, and you're trying to do that as well. And I don't know. It seems like it's a harder path to take there. Any other names we should look for? Anybody like digging a little deeper? Anybody else that you're looking forward to? Any other action you got? Any other draft futures that you're going to be looking for?
Yeah, I got to talk about him because this is a guy that I've been on since day one. I tweet about him every single time he starts. Jurrangelo, Cijntje, the switch pitcher from Mississippi State. This is a guy that I was all over in 2023. I loved watching him pitch, but it was so glaring that he had so many issues. He got dropped from the rotation. He ended up having a bad year. And then I felt like he was going to take this year. Now, Jurrangelo Cijntje being a switch pitcher, his approach this season coming in was primarily right-handed. And he would go matchup based when he would go left-handed. Now, in the first half of the season, if he threw 100 pitches in a game, he's throwing 70 from the right, 30 from the left. There was a couple lefties in the bottom of the order that he would game plan for to lefty, but then in the second half, he was primarily righty. Now, the thing is, I think in the big leagues, there's a realistic chance that he might land in the left-handed side altogether. By the way, he's throwing 95 from the left side, and he's throwing 98, 99 from the right. But the quantum leap that he made from last year to this year is unreal. It's one of the biggest leaps any player has made from last year to this year. He was unreal. The stuff looks fantastic. He cut down on the walks big time. It is still a problem, but he cut down big time. Strikeouts went up. He was able to go deeper into the games. He was able to handle the moment. And I'm just so impressed with him. And I've been talking about him, like I said, for the last 2 years, but especially all season this year before every start. And I would make a priority to bet him because a lot of times, when he was the Sunday pitcher early in the year, but then when he got moved up to the Saturday spot, Mississippi State was an underdog for a lot of those starts. You really had a lot of plus money with him, but nobody was really talking about him until MLB and ESPN came out with an article about him in mid-April, which was, by the way, 14 months late on when he first made it up to Mississippi State. But really not in early May did he start catching the draft hype and the wind. And then it kind of knocked into, him with the success he was having into even considering being a first-round territory. And now he's being regarded as possibly the fourth best pitcher in the entire big board. And the thing is, I'm expecting a lot from him. And by the way, Jeff, this kid is a freak athlete. 2 separate occasions when he's had to get over to cover first base, and the throw was a little short. He did full splits coming out of the sprint. Jeez. Full splits while catching the baseball. The athleticism of this kid who's only 5'11", 200 pounds is ridiculous. But he was 20.5 on the draft position. I took over because I think the hype and the exaggeration is a little bit too much. I would probably project him more as a mid to late 20s. My hope is the Rangers at him at 30 and pair him up with my boy Wyatt Langford.
Okay. That would just yet another fun young player for the Rangers. That's why the Rangers are so beguiling this year is because Langford got off to a slow start. He's raking now, obviously. Evan Carter's still hurt. They've had all the pitchers get hurt, but they're going to be good next year again too. It's going to be fun to see these guys.
Yeah, I mean, the Rangers, get the championship. I feel like you get the championship now, they kind of got the monkey off their back where they still have talent in the farm system. The 30th pick, they're going to have such great options this year at pick number 30 to take a meaningful impact guy for possibly to be called up within the next couple of years. And, I think Texas is in a really good spot. And, we didn't even talk about a lot of guys that could be first rounders that should be like Blake Burke. Blake Burke's a guy that I think realistically who's being mocked at as an early second could be a top 25 pick, or maybe somebody like, a Jacob Kozar who could really be the first catcher off the board this year. And you have guys in the second and third round as projected that were so good in college. And obviously not all of them work out, but there's just so much potential talent that you're going to be able to get even a pretty good player, within the first 4 or 5 rounds of this draft, at least from the college side.
Yep. And I can't wait to see it there. It's going to be awesome. Johnny, great stuff. I know we could have gone on for a lot longer, a lot more players to talk about, but I know you've got your stuff to do. I've got mine. And, I can't wait just to see all the drafts. I really appreciate all your expertise and your enthusiasm. Really, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, I appreciate you having me, man. It's always great to do this. And I'll tell you, man, if you're down Sunday for the first round, if you want to do a live show, get at me. While we watch the picks go on and kind of do a live reaction, just hit your boy up because I'm looking to do that.
All right, you guys should take him up on that. I'm going to be in Vegas, so I'm not going to be doing any sort of shows live or otherwise. But you know what? I'll be looking forward to seeing your work on that. Make sure to check out Breaking Bad. He had a podcast yesterday too. So check that out as well. Some good stuff there more about the draft coverage. Breaking Bed is the name of the podcast. Follow Johnny on Twitter @_JohnnyVTV. And of course, check out his work here on RotoWire. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks to Draftkings for their PickSix sponsorship, as well as Home Run Forecast. Tune in tomorrow. We got 2-star starters or just starting pitchers. There weren't going to be any 2-star starters next week, but Clay and Todd will be at you nonetheless tomorrow. Tune in. Thanks for listening to RotoWire.